So 11.3 is exploring Mendelian genetics a little bit further. So what we're talking about first with two-factor crosses is just dealing with situations where you have multiple traits, all right? And then this is going to happen in plants. We talked about it with Mendel's plants. You had the different pea pods, the different heights, the different flower growth, the different colors. All of these things are factors that can be explored. Now, independent assortment, though, states that genes that segregate independently do not influence the inheritance of each other. So the idea here is that you can have an offspring that is dominant for one trait and recessive for another, or vice versa, or any combination, that they're not going to influence each other's inheritance. Just because you're dominant for one trait doesn't mean you're going to be dominant for all the traits. So the principle of independent assortment states that genes for different traits can segregate independently during the formation of gametes. So if we take a look right here, this is a little Punnett square setup for crossing the homozygous dominant with the homozygous recessive and getting all heterozygotes. Now this picture that we're going to switch to right now shows that when you cross the two heterozygotes, you have the possibility of getting either one that shows both dominant characteristics, the round and yellow, shows the recessive color, green and round. You can have wrinkled and yellow, and you can have wrinkled and green. So look at those different combinations. Just because you have multiple, dominant traits being passed doesn't mean you can't end up with recessive for one, recessive for both, recessive for none. All right. So this is just what we're trying to show with two-factor crosses is that if they assort independently, they're not influencing each other's inheritance. So the summary of Mendelian principles: the inheritance of biological characteristics is determined by individual units known as genes. In organisms that reproduce sexually, genes are passed from parents to their offspring. In the case in which two or more forms of genes for a single trait exist, some forms of the gene may be dominant and others may be recessive, and the alleles for different genes usually segregate independently of one another. So let's talk about a different type of inheritance. This is outside of Mendelian genetics, and this is when they're not completely dominant or completely recessive. So incomplete dominance is when one gene is not completely dominant over another. And we'll see an example of that on the next slide. And codominance is when both alleles contribute to the phenotype of the organism. So chickens with both black and white feathers have codominant traits. So take a look at these flowers right here. You have a red and a white crossed, and you end up with pink. All right, this is incomplete dominance. It's neither red nor white. It's incompletely dominant. So multiple alleles is when genes have multiple alleles. It does not mean the individual has more than two. It means that more than two exist in the population. So polygenic traits are traits that are controlled by two or more genes. Skin color in humans is controlled by more than four. So multiple alleles is exemplified by this next picture with the rabbits. So if we take a look right here, there are four different types of alleles that can be combined, each with a different level of dominance. So you have the full color, the big C, is dominant to the little CCH, the chinchilla, which is dominant to the little CH, the Himalayan, which is dominant to the little c, the fully recessive albino. So if we look right here, we do have four different alleles that are, or types of alleles, but each individual still has two alleles. Okay, so there's four different possibilities in the environment.